My name is Dr. Ian Storch. I'm a board-certified gastroenterologist and osteopathic physician, and you are listening to DO or Do Not. If you are interested in joining our team or have suggestions or comments, please contact us at doordonotpodcast.com. Share our link with your friends and like us on Apple Podcasts, Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. We hope you enjoy this episode.
My name is Sean Kelly, and I am a fourth-year pre-medical student at St. Louis University who will be applying to osteopathic school next year, and you are listening to DO or Do Not. In today's episode, we are joined by my father, Dr. John Kelly, a general anesthesiologist practicing out of Port Washington, New York. Prior to attending New York Institute of Technology College of Osteopathic Medicine, Dr. Kelly worked as a chemical engineer for 5 years. During the episode, he discusses the transition from engineering to medicine, as well as what inspired him to do so. Dr. Kelly describes not only his non-traditional pathway to medicine, but what had drawn him to the field of anesthesia. He describes how he chose Mount Sinai Medical Center in New York City, a large MD institution where he, as a DO, was chosen to be chief resident his third year. Finally, he speaks about his transition from residency to becoming an attending, and what he thinks it takes to become a successful clinician. I know you will find my father's story as inspiring as I have. I hope I am able to follow in his footsteps and become an osteopathic physician.
All right, John, thank you so much for being with us tonight.
You're welcome.
Now, first of all, you're an anesthesiologist in a big cardiac hospital in New York. So can you tell us a little bit about what you do on a weekly basis or on a daily basis? Maybe even start off with what time you wake up in the morning and bring us through a day and what kind of cases you might do.
So I work at a cardiac specialty hospital. The anesthesia department basically has two divisions. I would say we have the anesthesiologists who do anesthesia for open heart surgery, bypass cases, open heart valve surgery, things like that. And I'm one of the general anesthesiologists who do everything else, which, typically there's a lot of orthopedics, general surgery, ENT, plastics, endoscopy, in addition to what we do at our outpatient centers. So our practice is kind of unique in that we take care of a lot of very sick patients. I'm not trained I didn't do a fellowship in cardiac anesthesia, but I do take care of a patient. If we have a patient who's coming in needs a valve replacement, they need a colonoscopy beforehand, I take care of them when they have the colonoscopy, or I take care of them when they have their echocardiogram. Things like that. So it's kind of unique, the practice that we're in. Typically, the ORs start from anywhere from 6 to 8 in the morning. Some locations actually start at 6 a.m., typically 7:30. So my day starts, get up at 5:30, 5:45 typically. I live pretty close to the hospital, so I have about a 15-minute ride. So that's a big help. And like I said, we typically do anesthesia for somebody having their appendix taken out, their gallbladder taken out, lung surgery, colonoscopy. We do some pediatrics as well. We don't do OB, which is nice for our practice because you don't have to stay in the hospital when you're on call. But again, we don't do obstetrics, and we don't do trauma also. So we do a lot of car crashes, things like that. That's not, our hospital doesn't. That gets diverted to another hospital nearby. We don't cover that as part of our practice.
So you do a lot of different things. You have to be versed in surgery for a lot of different things, but the cardiac stuff, that's special. That goes to a different group.
It's part of our group, but typically anesthesia training is 1 year of transitional year internship, then 3 years of anesthesia. If you want to do open heart, typically you do a fourth year of anesthesia training where you just do hearts and you learn how to do transesophageal echocardiogram. You do complex heart surgery. So I don't do that. We have 10 or 12 guys that do that and 20 of us that do everything else.
That's amazing. So tell us, John, I know you were just on call on Saturday. Can you tell us, how often do you take call and what does your call look like?
We have a pretty big group. We probably have 20 that take call. And again, the cardiac division takes their own call because they have their own nursing call team that does open heart surgery. We cover, again, like I said, everything else. So Saturday, I went in, we did anesthesia for a FEMPOP bypass. These are typically pretty sick patients that have vascular disease, that have an ischemic limb, an ischemic leg. That was the first case we did. Then we had a cystoscopy for somebody that came in with a stone. They become uroseptic. They can be very sick for that as well. And then my partner came in for an exploratory laparotomy for somebody that had a bowel obstruction. Again, people that aren't in medicine, these are pretty sick patients. So nobody likes to do really too much elective stuff on a weekend. So if you're cases that go on Saturday at night or Sunday, typically are patients that can't wait until Monday.
So, John, when you're on call, are you usually sitting at home watching the basketball game and then you get called in? Like, do you make dinner plans? Like, how do you usually set your schedule on those weekend days that you're on call?
We're pretty busy. Most of the time you're on call, you do get called in for something. Like I said, we don't do trauma or labor and delivery. So we're at home on call. There's no OR staff in the hospital 24/7 either. So typically if a surgeon books a case, we have about an hour to get into the hospital. And that's kind of unique to our practice. Unless it's somebody's bleeding or something, you get in as soon as you can. Everybody will rush in as quick as they can. But in some practices, like when I trained, you would stay in the hospital when you're on call because you could have anything roll in the door. Our practice doesn't really work like that. We do have time to get in because you're waiting on the nursing staff anyway.
So I'm going to switch gears a little bit and I'm going to kind of jump into your pre-medical life. So part of the reason why I really wanted to have you on the podcast is because you had sort of a full chapter before you went into medicine. So can you tell us a little bit about where you grew up and where you went to school and what your first career was like before you got into medicine?
So I grew up on Long Island. I'm from Hicksville. I haven't gotten very far over the years. When I was in high school, I liked science, was my favorite subject. When I went to college, I felt that pure science wasn't to study chemistry or physics was a little too academic, so I chose engineering. I studied chemical engineering. I went to what was then called Polytechnic University, which is now the NYU Tandon School of Engineering. They merged with NYU. So I studied chemical engineering for 4 years. With engineering is a lot of calculus, physics, math, thermodynamics, fluids, things like that. And then I had considered medicine during college. The thing that was missing in my curriculum, my undergrad curriculum, was biology. I didn't take any biology as an undergrad. So when I graduated, I started working. I wound up working for 5 years before I wound up going to med school.
John, tell us, what did you do? What kind of job did you have? Tell us a little bit about how you found the job and exactly what type of work you did. And then when you decided you want to go into medical school.
So I had 3 different jobs as an engineer on Long Island. Chemical engineers typically work in like the petrochemical industry, or pharmaceutical industry. You work, a lot of it's working for like Exxon and companies like that, refineries, things like that. That's kind of what your specialty is, I would say. But I did some environmental work. The first job I had when I graduated, I worked for a small environmental company. We did what was called stack testing. So basically, if there's an incinerator or a power plant, the EPA or the state would require that plant to be tested on a regular basis to check the emissions. And what our company did was we did that testing and wrote the reports that went to the EPA or to the state to show that they were in compliance with their emission requirements as set by whatever regulatory agency they had. So it was good. It was a great experience. It was a small company. So not only did I write the report, I was in the field. I climbed the smokestack. I drove the truck sometimes. Kind of did everything. It was a small company. We had maybe 2 engineers and a bunch of technicians that worked with us. So that was, good experience. First job out of college, and I traveled a fair bit on the East Coast. So, and then when I left that job, I said I was getting more serious about doing medicine. So I went to a chemical plant where I was a production supervisor in a chemical plant that made primarily polyester resin, which it's like the plastic that goes into polyester clothing, things like that. They made the bulk raw material for that. And I was just responsible for production. I was one of the shift supervisors in a plant that made polyester resin for clothing and for powder coating, like you would like powder coat a bicycle or things like that. That's when I took the biology courses. I wound up taking them at SUNY Farmingdale because that's what I was missing. And then I left that job. And the third job I had was working for a company that was purchased by Waste Management. Our company designed, built, and operated recycling plants. It's interesting. People don't realize that when you put your yellow can out of the curb, it's got bottles and cans and paper in it. Somebody has to actually process that. So what our company did was we designed, built, and operated plants that did that. So your can gets dumped into a garbage truck that gets taken to a plant, and somebody has to process that. And what I did for about a year and a half with them was, since Waste Management bought us, I traveled the US and Canada to different recycling facilities, looking at their operations and trying to make them more profitable, basically. So a little bit of financial stuff in there as well. And then I wound up getting accepted to med school, and here I am.
All right, John. So it sounds like you're really smart. You graduate from college. You have this job as a chemical engineer, which I think is a good, coveted job. Why didn't you want to keep doing that? Why did you want to go into medicine?
What's missing, and what I like about medicine, obviously, and I think you need to have this to be a good clinician when you're working, is the people skills. You have to work with people. What we do as a physician yourself, we impact people's lives on a daily basis. Every patient we meet, every patient we take care of, we really can help them. That's not something you do as an engineer. The work is interesting. The science is interesting, the math and all that, but it's lacking that. Makes you want to get up in the morning and go take care of somebody, or if there's an emergency, help people.
A little personal question, I apologize, but were you married at that point, or were you still single?
So this is interesting. So I was 27 when I started medical school, and I got accepted late. I got accepted, I think, in June of the year that I started. I was getting married in September. So I literally started at NICOM on a Monday. I got married on Saturday, and I was back in school on Monday.
Now, so you were with your wife, though, when you were applying, is that right?
Correct. Yes. And she's always been incredibly supportive, which you need if you're getting married, to have a spouse who understands what you're going through. My wife's a nurse, so she kind of had an idea what she was going to be in for. But yeah, I started med school, got married, went back to med school, delayed our honeymoon and everything. So it's really put our lives on hold for a few years.
Yeah, that's great. I mean, you need that support. Obviously, you wouldn't be able to do it, right?
Correct. I mean, you know yourself, the amount of work you have to put in, the amount of hours you have to put in, you need the support to do that.
So, John, just to take a step back before we talk about medical school, when did you learn about osteopathic school? And tell us a little bit about what your application process was like as a non-traditional student.
The barrier for me, I think, was coming out of an engineering program, which is, very rigorous. It's very hard to do well in engineering. Taking Calc 1, 2, and 3, you're taking fluid thermodynamics, fluid dynamics, things like that. So I certainly didn't come out with the high GPA that I think most pre-med students come out with. And the issue, I think, is that it's hard to get your application through the pile with that GPA until they actually look into your resume and say, oh, this guy's been out for 3 or 4 years. He's been doing this. He's studied engineering. That's kind of the hurdle I think you have to get through as a non-traditional applicant. Interestingly, when I took the MCAT, the first time I took it, and back when we took it, I think the sections were physical science, biological science, and maybe English. It was like 3 sections, 15 points each, if I remember. And I did, the first time I took it, the physical science, I got like a 14 on it because I just finished engineering. But I got like a 7 on the biology because I hadn't taken biology since high school. Then after I took biology, I went up on the bio to like a 12 and went down to a 12 or something on the physical sciences but again, I was also working. I had a full-time job. So studying was getting the books from the library and studying on the weekends or waiting for a plane or something.
For those students that are studying for the MCAT now, it sounds like that's actually a very good score that you ended up with. And again, as far as applying to schools, tell us about when you learned about osteopathic school and how you picked NICOM.
The first year I applied to school, I only applied to allopathic schools. Didn't get in, obviously, because again, I think the GPA was the hindrance. I think at that point I had learned about osteopathy from physicians that I had known. And at that point, honestly, DO schools were not on the radar initially, because certainly when I was first applying, to be honest, I didn't really know what an osteopathic physician was. I didn't know there was any difference. It's not something, I think a lot of people don't necessarily know what the difference is between a DO and an MD. Then I read the book. There was a book on the history of osteopathic medicine. I think he's been on your podcast, actually.
Yeah, it's called The DOs by Norman Gevitz. We had him on the podcast a while back. He's a good guy.
Yeah, I think somebody had recommended that I read that book before applying to osteopathic medical school. And then the last year I applied to only osteopathic schools. I got an interview at NICOM, and I got accepted late. It was June by the time I think I got an accept hold maybe in May because there was an issue with my application being complete, and then I finally got a spot.
John, do you remember the day you got the acceptance? Were you really excited?
Yeah, oh, absolutely. Yeah, of course. I was working. I was working in that job with the recycling industry, and I didn't love the work, honestly. And it was a very stressful time. Obviously, I was getting married. So what happened was NICOM application was incomplete on their record. I would call every month and say, "What's the status?" They said, "Oh, it's incomplete. It's incomplete." This went on for months, and finally, somebody else answered the phone. They said, "That doesn't make any sense. It shouldn't be incomplete." And they came back and said, "It was with the committee." And finally, when somebody else got on the phone, they said, "That's a long time. That doesn't make any sense." And they went back and they said, "It's not with the committee. It's incomplete. It was missing a letter of recommendation." So then when I sent that in, I got the accept hold. They said, "You're accepted, but the class is full." So you have to be your own advocate, certainly in the application process. I fired off a letter to the admissions department saying, "Listen, I did my part. I called. I said, I'd written down when I called, who I spoke to, and I said, this isn't on me. This is on you. You guys told me, it never communicated with me that it was incomplete." And then I got the spot.
It's amazing.
You really have to be your own advocate for everything, obviously.
Tell us a little bit about your experience at NICOM, and then tell us how you decided on anesthesia and what your application for residency was like.
NICOM was fantastic. We're from the same era, and certainly our pharmacology and toxicology training, I think, was kind of what made NICOM for us back then. We had, I think, the education was excellent. As an older student, and this being my second career, I was just thrilled to be there. For me, it took so much work and took so long to be where I was. And at this point, I'm married now. You had to take this seriously. This is you changed your whole life to do this. You got to buckle down and do it. And I really enjoyed everything. I loved all the different courses we took. I think it's important to go into med school, and I tell this to the medical students we have rotating at the hospital. You should try to like every single thing you do. You may think you don't like surgery until you actually do it, and you may say, "Oh my God, I love this," or medicine, or pathology, or cardiology. You really don't know anything about. You think you know, but you really don't know until you actually start doing it, and you're actually really in there. So I think you have to keep an open mind, try to learn as much as you can, because it can all help you. It helps your patients, that you know everything about certainly as much as you can. So when I was doing my third and fourth year rotations, I was thinking between anesthesia and surgery. I definitely went away from the medicine stuff, more toward, I liked urology, I liked ENT, I did like OB. But then when I found myself doing surgical rotations and I'd be scrubbed at the field, I would kind of be looking up at the anesthesia, kind of see what's going on up at that end of the table, whether monitoring the vital signs, see what was going on with the patients through induction and emergence. And what I like about anesthesia is that we take care of women. You can go anywhere from taking care of babies to 100-year-olds. That's pretty unique in medicine. I don't think there's anybody else who could take care of a 6-month-old as one patient. The next patient could be 100 years old. That's unique for us. It's critical care medicine, really, because if you think of what goes on under anesthesia, we take somebody to the operating room, we give them medication to make them unconscious. We have to breathe for them. We have to fix their blood pressure, raise their heart rate, lower their heart rate. We do a lot of, it's really all critical care. And you see the results right away. When you bring a patient out from surgery and they have no pain, or you do a nerve block for an orthopedic case and they go home smiling, not having taken any pain medicine, you get a lot of, it's rewarding that you can do that quickly. That's what I like to see.
All right, John. So you decide on anesthesia. It sounds like you certainly have a passion for it. And then you're applying out of NICOM for anesthesia residencies. Tell us how that application process went for residency, and then how you ultimately chose the program that you ended up in and what that was like.
So anesthesia, for those who don't know, you do one preliminary year and then you do your anesthesia training after that. You can really do anything you want for that first year, or at least we could do anything you want as long as it was clinical. You could do medicine, you could do surgery. What I wound up doing was the osteopathic rotating internship, because to me that was kind of perfect. Actually, you do a little bit of OB, you do a little bit of pediatrics, you do a few months of medicine. I think that was a good transition. But I think the best thing that I did as a student, as a fourth year student, was I wound up training at Mount Sinai in Manhattan, which was a fantastic training program. I did a month-long rotation there. And when you work your butt off on your rotation, you study, you do everything you can, you answer all the questions, you come in like you want to do this. And, and that's, I think it's almost like a month-long interview for you, because you get to know people and they say, how's your student? And if your student doesn't know anything, is not interested, and leaves every day early, that's reflected in when you get your evaluation. I think for any specialty, there's a place you want to go. You should try to get there rotation and work your butt off and show them what you can do.
And John, how did you feel as a DO at Mount Sinai, which is obviously a big academic MD institution?
It was great. There was certainly we had DO attendings. So in anesthesia, your third year, they select two chiefs typically for the program. And you're picked based on your clinical skill, leadership, because it's in addition to your clinical responsibility. So you're kind of responsible for making the schedule for the residents, putting out fires, any problem with the residents. And my CA3 year, which is your third year of anesthesia, myself and the other chief were both DOs. So clearly there was no anti-DO bias in the program. The following year, one of the chiefs was also a DO. So I think, like everything else, once you get into the program, nobody's really looking back to say, where's his degree from? Once you're there, obviously, because it's about what you do and how you work. And I think I would say you found the same thing. Typically, people don't necessarily ask you at this point where you trained or where you to medical school, certainly, because they want to know how you are as a clinician. That's more important. And I think that's what the programs see. Obviously, as things become more and more competitive, things always change. Everything cycles. Some things are more competitive now than they were 10 years ago, and that will change, obviously. But I feel like we had a great education at NICOM. We certainly worked our butts off. We had great clinical rotations. I think that showed in where people go in their match.
John, tell us finally, after you finished the residency at Mount Sinai, how did you pick a job? What was that process like? And how did you end up at St. Francis?
From Long Island, I wanted to come back to Long Island. It's interesting. I actually lived on Long Island while I was a resident. Our program was you could actually commute. It was reasonable that you could do that because of the way the call schedule was set up for the residents. Listen, St. Francis is one of the best hospitals on Long Island. I think our care is incredible. We have just meeting different groups, and I interviewed around different places on Long Island. What struck me about one of the guys I interviewed with, I remember telling me that, he's like, listen, wherever you wind up going, it's someplace you want to be for the next 20 or 30 years. You have to like the culture. You have to like the people you're going to work with. It could be the best hospital in the world, but if you have that feeling of family, you're going to spend more time in your practice than you are with your family. It's just the way it is in medicine. You have to be comfortable and happy with those people because you're going to spend the next 20 or 30 years easily with them, 8-10 hours a day. So for me, the culture at St. Francis, the skill of the surgeons, the skill of the anesthesiologists that were in the group, I just thought that was a great match. And what's interesting is that a lot of people from my practice trained at Mount Sinai as well. So I think in anesthesia, you train every residency kind of trains maybe a little bit different. They do things a certain way. For me, it was very easy to transition to my practice because so many of my senior partners had also trained at Mount Sinai. So we did things very similar. We knew a lot of the same people. People come from different programs. They do things a little bit different. Not that's right or wrong, but it's just a little bit different than what you're used to. So for me, that was a very easy transition.
John, we're going to shift gears again and kind of fast forward. One of the questions that I have for you is that, as many of the listeners may not know, but your son is actually active with our podcast and is interested in becoming a physician and potentially going to osteopathic school. A lot of doctors that I speak to say that they would never have their children go into medicine. And I always think that's interesting. So can you tell us a little bit about your son's interest in medicine, how you feel that you influenced it, how you feel about him going into medicine and potentially going to osteopathic school?
I've never pushed him toward medicine. I think he's a bright kid. He's always excelled academically. I would never want to push somebody to do medicine because we work very hard. And I think if you don't love what you do, you're going to be very unhappy. just because of the amount of work that we put in and the sacrifices we have to make. And I think he's seen that. He's 21 years old. He's seen dad running out of the house at 10 o'clock on a Saturday night to go do a case, or getting home at 3 a.m, or just not being around. So he certainly has been exposed plenty to that. And I think I'm a little bit different because, again, as a non-traditional applicant, I've done other jobs. I've worked in an office. I've worked in a plant. I've worked in the field. I love what I do now, and I think that that's important. I think people that say they wouldn't have their kids go into it, I don't know if they really have done anything else and they have a basis for comparison. You look at what we do and how lucky we are to take care of people and the trust they put in us. You don't find that in any other fields. And so the security that we have, we're never going to be out of work. Medicine's always going to be in demand. We've had to deal with COVID and changes with healthcare and the economics of it, but we're never going to be out of work. And the bottom line is taking care of people. I would love my son to go into medicine because I think he would make a great doctor. I think specifically osteopathic versus allopathic, I think wherever he gets into, that's the best school that can achieve his goals. I'd be very happy with it. It's very hard to get into medical school right now. There's a lot of people applying to so many programs. But ultimately, the med school, then the residency, and then you're going to practice whatever specialty you come up with. And again, you have to go in with an open mind. But I think you have to know that you want to apply science, work very hard, and take care of people, because that's what we do.
John, I love the answer, and thank you for that. Our last grand finale question, John. Can you give us one piece of advice that you were given from someone else that you think has impacted you and you would like to pass on to our listeners?
There's a Dr. Ray Soletic, who's actually retired now, as an ENT. I was his patient for years, and he was a mentor, I would say, as he knew I was applying to medical school. And I had the privilege of working with him as an anesthesiologist now, after I knew him when I was a kid. And he took out my tonsils and, over the years helped me applying to medical school. And the one thing he said to me that always stuck with me, he said, a lot of people helped me when I was applying to medical school and in life. And he said, I can't pay them back, but what I can do is pay it forward. So you can't help the people necessarily who helped you. He couldn't help the people. I couldn't help him since he had helped me. But the best thing I can do is help other people that are going through the process.
I think that's great advice, John. I think that's exactly what you did tonight. And I really appreciate you sharing your story with us.
Oh, you're welcome. I'm glad to be part of it. The history of osteopathic medicine.
This concludes our episode of Do or Do Not. Send all inquiries, comments, suggestions, and even let us know if there's someone you want us to interview to doordonotpodcast@gmail.com. Don't forget to like us on Facebook at Do or Do Not Podcast for updates. If you enjoyed our podcast, please share it with your classmates and administration. We have plenty of more interviews lined up, and we're excited to share them with you. This is Tian Yu Shea. Thank you guys so much for listening to Do or Do Not.